Oh my God. So, welcome everyone to this presentation. I'm not Jonathan Vasquez. I'm Jonathan Delgado, but my name tag here says Jonathan Vasquez. So, on behalf of Copy, we want to thank Professor uh, Cristian, who has joined today, Cristian Reyes, who has joined us today um, to share with us his results of his research study. So let me tell you a few words about us. In Ascopy, we are Jonathan Vasquez, who is the president. We have Felipe Mican, who's the vice president. I am Jonathan Delgado, the secretary. We have the treasurer, Luz Mari Quintero, and the vocal, Wendy Panche. Um, so, Asocopi is an association that tries to foster education, culture, science, technology, innovation, social development. We try to support and visualize nonprofit organizations and support educational initiatives and entrepreneurship. Um, we would like to invite you to our call for papers of our journal, How has been our journal for many years, and we invite you to read the articles that we have in this journal and to submit your papers if you have any so far. We would also like to invite you to our conference for this year that's called Transforming ELT Context, Saberes Locales, Diversities, and Artificial Intelligence. This is going to be a blended event. In the morning shift is going to be, presentations are going to be in person, and in the afternoon shift of the Congress is going to be online. So this is going to be held from October 1st through October 3rd at the WIS in Universidad Industrial de Santander in Bucaramanga, Colombia. We have very special um, plenary speakers. We have Dr. Berta Ramos, Dr. Ryuko Kubota, Dr. Samantha Curl, Dr. Jessie Ortega, and Dr. Dario Luis Vanegas. Um, so let me tell you about today's webinar. I'm going to introduce the speaker. His presentation is Heliconias Dreamers, Rural Teachers Dreaming, Teaching, Resisting ELT Otherwise. Professor Cristian Camilo Reyes Galeano is a full-time professor at the University of Quindío, Colombia. He holds a PhD in Education and Society and an MA in Language Didactics from Universidad La Salle. His teaching and research focus on foreign language education, rural schooling, interculturality and education, and decolonial pedagogies. He's a researcher is a PDX-B group and facilitator of Heliconias Dreamers, a community-based initiative that works with rural teachers to reimagine English language teaching from situated knowledges, territorial experiences, and pedagogical re-existence. So welcome, Professor. The floor is yours, and you can start.
Okay, thank you very much. I am going to share with you my screen, and so you can tell me if you can see it. Okay. Yes.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, thank you very much. So I would like to ask, how much time do I have?
You have 45 minutes.
Okay, 45 minutes. Okay, thank you very much. So, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you to be with me today in this presentation that I would like to socialize with you this activity and this part of research that I am doing in a part of our territory in Colombia, in the Department of Quindío, the place, as was mentioned before, where I am working in this section of the community. And of course, this is part of the activities that I am doing not alone. I am going to share with you part of this section, but in general, that is the kind of presentation that more than results is an initiative for most of you in order to understand different perspectives as we understand education and English language teaching. So in this part, Heliconias Dreamers, as you can see on the picture, is trying to do something different, but I would like to begin with an invitation. For these minutes in which I am going to share with you my experience, I invite you to leave behind the conventional maps in which we understand English language teaching, because most of the time we believe that English is just a linguistic or a communicative competence. In this case, we are going to start with not with those proficiency levels. In this case, I am going to share with you other kind of English that is possible to learn, that is possible to understand, that is possible to negotiate, and particularly that burns or re-exists, as he said in the title, from the mountains, from the rivers, and particularly from the coffee culture. For that reason, this presentation begins with a flower, but this flower for many people is just a decoration. No, for us, it's a metaphor in which we understand our strength, our beauty, our resistance, and particularly our pedagogical resistance. I would like to answer during these minutes this kind of question, but more than identify a specific question is try to reflect during this time, and at the same time that you reflect in your own practices, the practices of education, of teaching that you are doing in your context. They could be rural, they could be urban, but at the same time, they call us. And it is, what does it mean to teach English from places that educational policies often consider peripheral? In this case, I don't talk just rural, as he said in the title, or maybe as I said at the beginning. In this part, I want to share with you the story of those dreams, of those resistance, and particularly the activities that we are doing in our field. For us, Heliconias Dreamers, we believe that rural teachers are not on the margins of ELT. We are at the moment cultivating new futures for language education. And with this statement, I am going to develop in a way of conversation why we decided to say that, and why we are Heliconians, and why we are rethinking English education in another way, otherwise, and in another terms that I will share with you after is other ways of trying to learn this foreign language. For that point, you maybe could ask yourselves, why heliconias? Because heliconias is a flower, and what is the relationship between heliconias as a flower and the activities that you as rural teachers or professor at the university, a public university, you are doing in the rural spaces or territories? It is because in these territories, this plant, this flower, is really common. If you go to the rural schools here in Quindío, you are going to find different flowers when you arrive to schools. And so that is a name that we decided to call for ourselves as a collective group, as a community of research, as a community of education, training, and at the same time, innovation. But this innovation, this research, this collaborative group is not only for languages. It is because in these spaces, these rural spaces, we reflect on teaching, we reflect on caring our pedagogical practices, but at the same time transforming these practices of teaching in these spaces. I would tell you before, I would tell you later, sorry, why we think in resisting to a imposed curriculum that at the same time tell us what to do, but maybe don't let us to dream that kind of education that we want to work every single day in order to achieve that transformation that we dream. For that reason, this collective group that is called Heliconias Dreamers grows from the soil of the communities, the histories, the memories that are inside the territories that are there, and they are also a valid knowledge that we need to discover. And for that reason is that we need to discover in that every single day the pedagogical work that must be shown, that pedagogical knowledge that is colorful, that is resilient, that flourishes under conditions that for many people and also for us could be a little bit difficult. But in this case, this heliconia as a metaphor became more than a symbol. It became a metaphor in which rural teachers and also preservist teachers are engaged in order to transform that education, particularly in English as a foreign language. Then there is a set of questions, or as in the common research, we call, well, what is the gap of your activity? For us, is not try to identify a particular gap. Okay, this is the problem, and we want to solve that problem with a general objective, with a question of research. In this case, is that always we are trying to reflect and trying to do actions about these pictures that you can watch on the screen. There is a curriculum that is established to teach English in different establishments of our territory in Colombia. But also these books and this material arrive to rural schools. What happened when you, as a teacher, a multi-grade school, you have to teach English and you have to teach a subject in which you are not trained? That could become a difficulty. And that is the point in which teachers in these spaces are evaluated according to the levels that they achieve. For that reason, always with this group, we reflect, what does it mean to teach English from rural classrooms, historically positioned at the margins of ELT policy, research, and innovation? Because we can identify that this material that you find in many schools, they are believed, they are thought from urban spaces, but they don't talk with the realities that we have in these rural areas. Identifying that here in Quindío we have 12 municipalities, and each municipality, even that we are in the same department, we are not the same, because Finlandia is not the same from Salento. Salento is not the same to Calarcá. Each rurality is a different space. It's a different environment. It's a different context. For that reason, we don't talk about one rurality. We talk about ruralities in which it's possible to ask not only the difficulties that are inside these spaces. We ask, how is possible that these spaces that exist could re-exist with the knowledge, with the creativity, with the pedagogical options that at the moment many teachers are doing there, and recognizing their efforts to make possible that education arrive to these spaces. And when you try to make the tension between the general education, and particularly this right to receive a foreign training in English that is established as a that foreign language that must be taught in this context. So we identify that there is another way to try to teach this foreign language, and of course to resignify this option of teaching, but of course the option of learning otherwise. Then you maybe could ask, where are the territories in which you are working at the moment? So this is with these movements, because at the beginning I started in Finlandia. So Finlandia, sorry, I am going to let just do like that because that moved me. Okay. At the beginning, I started in Finlandia. That was part of my doctoral thesis, the option that I was doing in my doctorate, trying to work with many teachers in Finlandia to resignify the process of teaching English as a foreign language. But then, when this consolidation of our community of teaching, learning, and innovation, these options arrived to other municipalities like La Tebaida, Genova, Córdoba. At the moment, we are working with 45 rural schools, and of course with 45 teachers, rural teachers. We are working together in this option in which we dream and we cultivate and we try to germinate that rural multigrade teaching with English, but trying to resignify this process of teaching that I am going to explain you later. So, in these 45 rural schools, we are trying to negotiate multiple responsibilities while creating meaningful educational experiences. Why with these institutions? Because the directors, the coordinators, the directives, they said, I would like to receive the training that the Heliconias Dreamers is doing with different institutions, but because the methodology that you are doing help us to recognize ourselves as protagonists, as the actors that could make possible teaching this foreign language, even when we are not English teachers, so we didn't study for that. So in this case, they engage. And for that reason, in these municipalities in which I am working in, the teachers are involved as creators, as principal actors, and not only in Quindío, at the moment in other departments like Santander, this initiative has recalled the attention for many directors that they want to also receive the training, and of course try to make that negotiation of the curricula with the local interest. And I would like to share this part with you, that is the tension that we make in Heliconias Dreamers, and it is like the core, yes, of our political and ethical pedagogical action. In general, we identify that we have the Guía 22, we have the suggested curriculum, we have mallas de aprendizajes, we have also ley de bilingüismo, ley de lenguas, etc. But what happened with English? Okay, and at the moment, of course, the suggested curriculum for French. But at the moment, we understand that English is a pathway for competitiveness and the global participation that is established in the for the Ministerio de Educación in Guía 22, right? But what happened when that law arrives to rural areas? We need to know that in rural areas, uh, teachers in English, they don't arrive there, because I want to say this in Spanish because is also as a part that is a reality that claims our teachers and also our directors. Los licenciados en lenguas modernas o extranjeras o cualquier denominación no quieren ir a ruralidad porque piensa que fueron formados para secundaria. But what happened when we identified that in these contexts and also in these territories, we identified that English must be taught, but not with that idea of globalization, with that idea that could be a resignification of the local realities of the communities. So that is the exception that we identified there. Besides, all the time that we are teaching English at the school or maybe at the university, we are thinking in standards, common learning outcomes, planifying learning outcomes. But most of the time, we are asking, are you A1 level, B1 level, B2 level? We are performing our students for community frameworks, international frameworks, alignment with international frameworks, measurement. How was your level in the Saber 11? How was your level in Saber Pro? We are always talking about the effectiveness of the accuracy of your teaching, the results, the measurement, because that is an option that is aligned with the neoliberalism. Yes, the quality of education, but what happened when we arrive to this context and we understand that over there, the community tells you about learning trajectories, the memories, actions that are happening there, and they are not interested on your measurement. Yes, because they like to learn how to present their realities to a foreigner but in English, because these foreigners arrive to these realities or arrive to these territories due to the tourism, due to this participation in different activities, and also because Quindío is promoted as a touristical environment. Yes, that is one reason. But what happens when the community tells you, I would like to learn English because that is a way how I can participate in different initiatives to protect my environment, my territory, and I see that maybe with international investment that could be possible. So I identify that with my community, but in this case, not only the community is interested on responding a measurement or the strategical national project that is in the suggested curriculum or is really not connected with the rural realities that happen in these schools. So for us, we make a negotiation between global frameworks and of course the local knowledges. What happened there? We need to know that of course the Minister of Education makes the evaluation with Saber 11, but Saber en quinto grado, noveno grado, of course. But in these cases, the students they can respond to these realities, but at the same time, they respond with the local necessities because we have to teach English because it's mandatory at the school and taking into account the Ley 115, that of course we need to teach another language and of course accomplish the requirements for international measurement. But here we understand English not as a data strategical and national project that we have to show evidence. No, here English is a language that we try to make situated, that is pedagogical, and that we understand as a social practice in which we recognize our practices, we recognize our culture, we recognize our identities, and we resignify that those knowledge that for many people could be subalternized. And here, of course, teacher is not an implementer, that they receive material to teach. Here, teachers in Heliconias Dreamers, they planify, they create, and they validate with the community and also with their own practices the curriculum that they prepare, reading, understanding, and reflecting the community, necessities of the community, but at the same time, their own necessities as professors. Well, in this section you said, well, that sounds fantastic, it's good, or maybe you talk like a fantasy, or it could become like a dream, like the son of Abba. I have a dream, a fantasy. No, this is not a fantasy, because we are supported in other studies, because this part is also academic, because we in our community we were reading about three important categories. They are ELT, English language teaching, of course, the colonial and critical education, and deception of rural education. If you see in this section, there are around 160 studies in which we are supported. These studies explain the importance of resignify English teaching according to the local necessities, situated knowledge. The decolonial and critical education is like the support that we receive from other realities, other territories around the world, but particularly in Africa and Latin America, in which professors, academics, researchers are rethinking methodologies of language teaching, but not only language teaching, other subjects like mathematics, like social sciences, uh, and of course the resignifying the projects that they are doing in community. And this section is like a debt that we have with our country, rural education that is understood, and that rethink that is the lack. Though those territories are lack of uh, technology, lack of resources, lack of infrastructure, but not. These authors, like you can see in these roots, they show us that not is a lack of deficit. The deficit could be material, but there is a support that is presented in the community, a support that is presented in the job, and also that extra job that many teachers, many parents, many cares that they are doing in the communities. For example, a rural teacher that is deciding to do extra job because he or she wants to do uh, a small garden with the community, because at the end they are going to sell their own products to restructure or to transform or to paint the school. That is an option that is happening in our schools, not is outside. It's here in Quindío, is happening there. And so with these authors, we decided to say that I don't start from scratch on this academic work. On the contrary, I mentioned here, I began the process of breaking new ground in this field of knowledge by building on what other voices have articulated and on what has been cultivated and harvested in other areas. Because as you can identify, I work with authors like Pennycook, Huri, national authors in Colombia like Miss Nieto, and of course, for example, Bonilla Carvajal, and the directions that understand the UNESCO, and Cruz Arcila, our referential authors that we read them, but they help us to understand that world of possibilities that we are dreaming. For that reason, you can appreciate like roots that help us to understand our process of growing. And in this part, that is the methodology that during these 4 years, me as a facilitator and also with my community, we are trying to consolidate. This methodology of Heliconias Dreamers, the way of rethinking education, is trying to walk by the side of the community, listening the necessities that are not the same as I mentioned before, because each rurality, each school, each institution has their own necessities. For that reason, we need to walk by the side, listen carefully, activate the senses when we are by the side with them, and co-creative, because most of the time we believe that teachers, they need the the solutions, we can say like that. No, why not we could create co-create the those options in order to resolve or to attend that necessity. For that reason, you can see here like 5 steps that we follow, connected with false border and also with freire, that option of opening new ways, opening the participatory option research, and of course reflecting on the options that we perform. In the first part, we understand the option of listening our own affections, our own oppressions that could become like a teacher, but before a teacher, I am a human being. Why is my desire to become a professor, a teacher? Why am I rural teacher? What is the essence of being here? And then with this dialogue, we connect with other teachers and with other communities to understand why, after have reflecting about being teacher, why I want to answer to that mandatory option of teaching English in the educational system. And why do I want to engage with that option that is mandatory? When we reflected on that, we decided to make a design taking into account these minister documents, but reading our own necessities. For that reason, most of the time we make uh, mm, instruments like ficha pedagógica territorial. This kind of document helps teachers to read the necessities with the community. Sorry, with the community, and also with different statements that are around the school. But most of the time, we don't consider them when we make this kind of decisions that we planify. And that happens with the Minister of Education, that they make the decisions or they take into account important teachers, important academics, that they read the necessities, but just with academic perspective, but they dismissing the communitarian perspective, and this option of reflecting with the community, that is important. Then, with this planification that is co-designed, we go to the option teachers implement what they have created, and they evaluate their own options with their own communities, parents, students, leaders around the school. And then this reflection comes back with the facilitator, in this case with me and other academics, that we trying to do corrections, adjustments, in order to respond to those necessities that we identify at the beginning. So this knowledge that is collaborative emerge through relationships, conversations, reflections, collective and pedagogical work. Then this is our collective of Heliconias Dreamers. As you can see, here we have different groups of teachers. And as I said before, we are in Finlandia. This is like the foundational group with 5 rural teachers and 6 preservers English language teachers. Then the second group that was connected here was teachers from La Tebaida, Cordoba. But in this part, we are a community of rural educators that in a collective way we reimagine new possibilities for language education. Of course, I have to mention most of them are not English teachers. They are licenciadas en español, en sociales, en educación física, incluso gerontólogas. But they have a dream, and that dream is that their own children they have the possibility to learn this foreign language and they can be connected not for the global competition, no, connect with the entire world with their own territories. And of course, in during this time of working together, I can mention some blooms that I want to share with you today. The first one is dreaming otherwise, and that otherwise is in the title of this webinar because we dream that this option of teaching otherwise is possible when we are connected, when we are reflecting, and of course, it's because we don't follow just instructions of policy mandates. No, our dreamings started when we start to reflect and listening other people by the side, trying to connect our realities and of course the necessities of our students. A second one is the teaching from the territory. We receive many material, yes, many books, many instructions, many trainings, like here are called capacitaciones. Capacitaciones that our teacher said, like that you are not able to do something. So we decided to change it and we don't talk about capacitaciones. We talk about formaciones, like trainings, right? In this planification, we have identified, for example, the necessities of our parents, our communities, and they said, ¿cómo poder hablar inglés con recetas tradicionales y francés? I read that in Spanish because it was in Spanish, this perception of parents, yes? Me gustaría aprender inglés de una manera didáctica, con juegos, con los valores, con el compromiso. Me gusta que les enseñen inclusión personal, el compañerismo y también francés y también recetas y canciones con cuentos, con mitos. What happened when we started to reflect these perceptions from parents? So we decided to make the options that I mentioned before, this one, the methodology. And after this option of methodology, we made the book, the collaborative book that is called Other Ways. Other Ways, that is our book or our booklet that we follow in these institutions, in these rural schools, and we teach English taking into account the necessities that were read at the beginning in collaboratives, groups, and we make cartografías in order to read the necessities from the community. And what happened with other ways that the students learn English through local stories, environmental knowledge, family histories, agricultural practices, or community experiences. So, in this case, the territory and the knowledge that is situated became a textbook. In this case, is Other Ways. And who are the protagonists? As you can see here, is the Comunidad Mixta de Investigación, Formación e Innovación, Heliconias Dreamers, our teachers. The bloom number 3, resisting neutral English. Most of the time we believe that English is just for traveling, just for business. No, in this case, it's a way to show our realities. So in this case, we ask in our training, English for whom? English for what purposes? Measurement, it fits, or English connected to our realities. So our question in our meetings is resistance does not mean rejecting English because people want English. This resistance that you see in the title of our webinar is a resistance that means reclaiming the right to contextualize English, and not for many academics that they say that rural children they don't deserve to learn English. Of course they deserve, but they deserve to learn that English that is not urban, is at English that is contextualized from the same protagonist, the rural teachers, and of course the rural communities, as you can see in these pictures. Then we have the bloom number 4, and that is pedagogies of care and resistance. Here we don't care about teaching, and this is the training. Please, teachers, go to the schools and try to do the job, and that's it. Take a picture for the evidence, as many institutions do. In this case, is that we care. We are by the side. We have the trainings. We have our own identity that is constructed with our teachers. And of course, we nurture our relationships as professors, as teachers, and we are trying to do something collaborative from the University of Quindío with these institutions in rural areas. And we create educational spaces where dignity, belonging, and learning could coexist, even when you are not trained as an English teacher. And of course, you can see here many pictures because the flowers to the seeds is what is ELT otherwise? Is going to the school, is going to the territory, stay with the community, be involved with the community and also with the realities that happen at the school, is trying to promote other possibilities for them, is trying to read the necessities not only with English. For example, here it's happening with French too. French arrives to the rurality too, trying to answer to that initiative of French for our communities. Of course, English, Spanish, French, and other languages. For example, here we have indigenous languages. They can dialogue and they can make an interruption, as I do in this presentation that sometimes I change to Spanish because it's not the master. And then, for example, this sisterhood. A sisterhood because you need to understand, and this is a part of the evidence. Most of the education of rural spaces are supported, these options are supported by women. Women are supporting these spaces and they engage with this rethinking of doing education otherwise. It doesn't mean that men are not engaged. Of course, they are engaged. But if you can watch most of my pictures, most of the teachers that are working with me and they are engaged with this commitment are women. So I want to recognize their job and they want to congratulate them and of course be proud of them because they accepted me even when I am a man. And so they work by my side. I am happy to share with them. And they also share this experience in many of their institutions. Finally, I would like to ask you, what does this matter for English language teachers? Why Heliconias or this webinar is important, or what is the reflection? This work resonates with English language teaching, particularly with 4 points. The first one is that most of the time we are thinking in the teacher development and inclusion, but we are not engaged really with it. Of course, we don't recognize the diversity that we find in our spaces, and we think that all the spaces learn at the same time in the same way, but not. The realities are, of course, different. It is possible to make a professional collaboration even when you are not an English teacher, even when you are not prepared for that. Heliconias Dreamers is an evidence that it doesn't matter what is your discipline, you can be involved and you can make transdisciplinary, interdisciplinary activities. And of course, that quality of language education is possible if we work together, if we work in a community. And of course, Heliconias Dreamers reminds us that educational quality cannot be reduced to proficiency scores alone. Of course, this quality that most of the time we have to accomplish in our job must be also an option of justice, participation, agency, and interaction with the different communities. This is a final reflection that I want to share with you is that these rural teachers, not only here in Quindío, but also in different departments and countries in which I have been, in which I have worked with these professors, they are knowledge producers. And of course, that these territories, these schools, they have many options and of course initiatives to make a pedagogical innovation, and the territory can be like an open book to resignify our curriculum, our practices of teaching. And finally, in that section I make this involved is that perhaps the future of ELT is not waiting for us in the center or in that standardized knowledge. Maybe that knowledge can be rebuilt, resignified, and could be bloomed from these rural spaces in which many teachers, many children, many communities, they are expecting not our help because they are doing many things alone, but that they need the support and the stay by the side in order to achieve the real goals that they want, because they don't want to leave their identities of being rural. They want to show to the world that there is another possibility of being a human being, to participate in the global citizenship, but in another way. For that reason, it's a resistance, and it is reimagine the education otherwise. Then I have here my references. I would like to share with you. And thank you very much. And I am open to your questions.
You, Professor Christian, for such an enlightening presentation. Um, I wonder if anyone in the audience has any question about this presentation. In the meantime, I have a few questions and comments about it. Well, personally, I'm very interested in these kind of topics, in these kind of initiatives, because I'm also like trying to explore a little bit more how rural education can tell us more things, can yeah, can shed light of what we are doing and how we can decolonize even urban education. In that sense, if we as teachers, if we as English language teachers in cities want to promote like a different view of the world, different views of the territories, even though we live in the cities, what could be your advice for us as teachers and for the students?
Okay. You want to make the questions one by one?
Yeah, this one.
Okay, good. Thank you. Well, as I said before in my presentation, when we arrive to the first point, is trying to make the teachers conscious, yes, conscious of the importance of their participation in the resignification of these modifications or resignification of curriculums, because most of the time teachers are believed to accomplish goals, standards, learning outcomes, and that is established and I cannot modify them. But most of the time these modifications arrive just for an evaluation. Yes. Oh, well, Professor Jonathan, you have to modify the English curriculum, and then you modify very fast, but without any reading of the local necessities. For that reason, with our teachers in Heliconias, we made the ficha pedagógica territorial. What is happening around the school? What is happening with the parents? What is happening with the students? What are their traditions? What are their daily activities? In that way, we can recognize, for example, that in most of the school, we don't have local students. They are migrants. Ah, but why do you have migrants here in this institution? Is because that reading shows us another reality that is happening in our country. Why do I have in this classroom indigenous students? It is supposed that indigenous students must be in this part or in this part. But when you resignify the curriculum without any reading or any identification diagnosis around your school, that resignification is not going to be according to the goals that you want to achieve or that you want to perform. Uh, Most of the time, I work with rural institutions, but now I am trying to work with a private institution in the city, and they asked me to advise their plan of bilingualism. But what happened with these institutions? I say that openly. Most of the time, they saw that we achieved the C1 level, because if I saw that, you can come to my institution. But what happened with those realities that are not read in those institutions in which many teachers are involved, and they have to follow some steps, some planifications, but without any diagnosis or any engagement with the commitments of transforming education. So, and the first part is make the trying to make as teachers conscious of their important role of resignifying curriculum. And the second one, or the second advice, could be the reading of the diagnosis of those realities that are happening at the school.
Thank you. Um, I have another question, but first I'd like to read two questions from the audience, and then I'll be back to my own question. So, Professor Mikan is asking, well, great, Professor Camilo. Thank you for sharing your work. How do you think we can connect people from the cities and people from the ruralities? What would be the implications for the design and adjustments of licenciatura programs in Colombia?
Well, that those are good questions in general, because that is part that is happening in our university. Well, I start with the first question, and it is, how do you connect people from cities with ruralities? I have had the experience with my students in pre-service with mother languages. Um, if you see, for example, most of them, they don't have the chance to have opportunity of pedagogical practice in these spaces. So the invitation to go there, but not like assistance. Oh, I go to the rural school for an assistance. No, they don't need assistance, because I tell you here, I told you, it's not like these spaces have lack of. They don't lack of. They have enough to share with us, and we don't need to go there for in a way of extractivism. Yes, we need to negotiate. What do I need, and also what do you need? How can make this connection? And of course, the this kind of interruptions, this kind of academic events, they help us to connect with this rurality, but of course with the city or the urban ideas. in which we can divulgate the actions that we are doing in these territories. And then, for example, the interactions that we make with different official institutions. Here, the university, the communities, the rural communities don't go to the university. Instead, it's the university that goes to the territories. And it must be our pedagogical, ethical, and political commitment as teachers. Then, in the second one, the implications for the design or adjustments. Most of the time, we think that our bachelors in modern languages or in foreign languages, they are more interested in level of proficiency of languages. And it is supposed that we are a licenciatura. But at what moment do you start to live the real training for being a teacher? And trying to understand that you have a political and ethical uh, endeavor trying to change those realities in these sections. So we have many credits or créditos for language. But what happened with the credits for this interruption or immersion with those realities? I don't talk just with rural interruptions. Also, we have realities in our cities with migrants. We have also with indigenous, with Afro-American, Afro-Colombian groups. And here, for example, in Armenia, it's happening another situation with Venezuelan groups that we have in our institutions, or for example, indigenous groups that arrive to the school and they don't speak Spanish. But why don't they speak Spanish? And what happens when you have to teach a foreign language, but they don't speak Spanish? But your professor of professional practice is going to observe how do you teach English when the reality is another one. So that is a way of rethink. But of course, I say that maybe when we try to rethink, as maybe many authors mention, we have to feel uncomfortable. If we don't feel uncomfortable, we don't make any action for the transformation.
Right. Thank you, Professor Christian, for your answers. Well, because of time, we'll have to stop here. Once again, Professor Reyes, we want to thank you from Asocopi for sharing with us this vast and huge research process and pedagogical initiative you have carrying out this time. So yeah, congratulations. And personally, I learned many interesting things out of this presentation. Thank you all for being here, and we invite you to attend our next webinars in July. Ah,
Okay.
yeah, your email. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing your email. Yeah,
Okay, thank you very much. This is our email, maybe for the audience or people who are interested in our job. And well, Heliconias Dreamers in Armenia, Quindío, and in different parts in which in the future we are going to open our activities. You are welcome. And finally, this is our website. Maybe if you would like to get more information about our training, our options, and maybe you are more for reading than listening, that's open for you.
great. Thank you for sharing.
Okay, thank you very much.
Have a good night.
Mhm. So do you.